though we've suspected these things, we now have the evidence to back it up. It's just not a suspicion anymore. Preachers who are not believers was a study that was done by a woman, Linda Scola, and one of the four horsemen, Daniel Dennett. Well, growing out of that work, preachers who are not believers, came this courageous phenomenon known as the Clergy Project. Now, the Clergy Project is a private, invitation-only safe house. It's a community of current and foreign ministers, or former ministers, who no longer hold the supernatural beliefs of their religious traditions. The Clergy Project was recently started, it's only about a year old, or maybe slightly longer, by the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins and the philosopher Daniel Dennett, one of the other four horsemen, and also included Linda Scola, and by Dan Barker. And I think most of you know that Dan Barker is the co-director of Freedom from Religious Foundation. Now, Jerry DeWitt is currently the executive director of Recovering from Religion, but he is also the very first graduate of the Clergy Project. For Jerry, his ministry began at the tender age of 17 years old, and he evangelized the United States and assisted in 3 Pentecostal churches. Later, he held the pastoral of 2 fundamentalist congregations. But after more than 25 years of ministry, he realized that he had become an atheist. Now, Jerry he's married for 22 years. He has 1 son, and we hoped that he was going to be with us today, Paul, but couldn't make the trip. And they all live down in rural Louisiana. Now, currently, Jerry is working on his memoirs, and it's called Hope After Faith. You might want to make a note of that, Hope After Faith. But today, what Jerry's going to do is share the highlights of his journey from belief to atheism, and he's going to describe how he found hope for life after outgrowing religious faith. Jerry DeWitt.
Thank you, sweet. Thank you. To be honest with you, I'm somewhat amazed that after just a few months, already there's somewhat of an expectation about what I'm supposed to say and how I'm supposed to carry myself. And because I find it enjoyable before I'm through here today, I will do my best to preach for you for a few minutes. With your permission, of course. If you think that it'll cause you any trauma or make you have any flashbacks, then I'll warn you in advance and you can leave. And if I haven't warned you, then I will tell you I've yet to start preaching. It's just the way I carry myself. Some people think I'm already preaching because I've honestly been stunned. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm thankful. But I've honestly been stunned at the love, the appreciation, and even the attention that I've received from the secular community. Because I didn't even know you existed until after the car crash, which is my life. And I understand that there's an expectation for me to carry myself a certain way and act a certain way and to be this person, Jerry DeWitt, that people are hearing about from time to time. But if it's okay with you today, today's an anniversary for me. And if it's okay with you, I just kind of want to relax for the next few minutes and tell you my story and not try to pretend to be someone that I'm not or even try to be someone that people may expect me to be. Do I have your permission to do that? Thank you. A year ago today, about 11:30 in the morning, I was sitting at my dining room table. My wife of 22 years, not easy years, difficult years. The ministry has a way of demanding a focus in your life that few professions demand. And it had taken a toll upon my family. My son says he has few memories of me that doesn't have a cell phone next to my ear, because in the ministry, and particularly in pastoring, I was, as it were, married to the church, and thus intimately, emotionally intimately involved with every member of the congregation and even their extended family members. And I spent many a night at the emergency room trying to help people through symptoms and through horrible heartaches and situations that we all encounter in life. I've been the person who stood by the bedside holding the hand of the surviving spouse, or what would soon be the surviving spouse, watching the heart monitor as the beats begin to be fewer and fewer and further apart. And so my life as a minister was about anything but making money. It wasn't about making money, and it wasn't about trying to be popular, though I am a professional people pleaser. You don't stop growing, at 5'5" and not learn how to get along and figure out how important it is to please people. I like to call myself a lover, not a fighter, but I'm not sure I've had that much practice in either one. And so I would say to you that my marriage had taken a very, very hard toll by just being in the ministry. At different times, I thought I had routes out of the ministry, and I worked in public service. Over the course of a decade and a half, I spent 10 years at City Hall. I'd been everything from the code enforcement officer to the director of community service and the chief of staff for our mayor's office. But even that lifestyle, even that level of public service, because I was already known as a preacher, it demanded more out of me, and thus more out of my family, than what some people would be willing to tolerate. And so a year ago today, 11:30, my wife is home for lunch. We're sitting at the dining room table. It's one of my favorite pieces of furniture in the house. We have a small Acadian-style home, only about 1,600 square feet. We bought it whenever I was a full-time pastor and also the mayor's chief of staff. We were so proud of it. It was our dream home. People would ask us, several people at work asked me, "What do you think about your new house?" And I come from poor means, and my wife had come from poor means, and it was a huge deal to buy this home, even though it was about 30 years old, but it was in the nicest neighborhood, the most beautiful neighborhood in our little town of 10,000 called DeWitt, Louisiana. And I would tell people when they'd ask what we thought about our new home, I would say, we love it like a person. And we did. And we filled it with new furniture that was meaningful for us. My wife is only about as tall as I am. Our son towers over us. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but we leave it alone. If he walked in the room right now, his hair is long and dirty blonde, and it looked like Thor had walked in the room. You would have expected to hear a thunderclap somewhere. And so the dining room table, it's tall, and the chairs are more like stools than regular dining room chairs. And I don't know, maybe it's part of my little man syndrome, but I love sitting up high in this dining room table. And so it's 11 o'clock in the day. My wife is home from lunch. She has a clerk's job, meager job, customer service, taking utility bill payments. She's home for lunch, and I get a text from my best friend. This gentleman, he and I had met several years before. He had actually replaced me whenever I left City Hall as the code enforcement officer and began to pastor full-time. This gentleman I'd made friends with him then, but he had become my best friend over the course of the year prior to December the 1st, 2011. And so it wasn't unusual for me to receive a text from him. And at that moment, he was actually my boss. And he asked me to meet him at the waffle shop. Would I be available at lunchtime? As a building official at that time, I was on call, and I waited for the phone to ring or to receive his text and get my instructions for the day of where I needed to go, which job site I would need to go and do what type of inspection for. And so he asked me, can I meet him for lunch? And that wasn't unusual. And I said, sure, in just a little while, if you don't mind. My wife and I are finishing up her lunch, and then I'll meet you over there. That was a year ago today. Now, what's important to understand is that the 2 months prior to that event had been, up till then, the hardest 2 months of my adult life. In April of last year, I had preached what would become my last Christian message. I can no longer say I preached my last message because I've preached a few times since then. But I preached my last Christian message. In May of last year, I joined the Clergy Project and began to deal more specifically and more intentionally with my growing awareness of my atheism. Because of my connection to the Clergy Project, in October of last year, I attended my first convention, the Free Thought Convention in Houston, Texas, and I was able to spend time with Professor Dawkins, and I witnessed Christopher Hitchens' last public event. And it was life-changing. And the room was filled with beautiful faces like yours and beautiful people like you. And I made friends with so many that when I got home, I remembered my Facebook page. And I thought, you know, I need to go on my Facebook page and make a few changes, because when those people from the Free Thought Convention go home and look me up, they're going to think I was a spy. And so I make a few changes, and I change my religious status to secular humanist, and I start posting people that I like and subjects that I like, such as Dawkins and Carl Sagan and Christopher Hitchens, and I post a picture that I had taken. It was actually a picture of me and my son with Professor Dawkins. And there's another picture that's floating around, and it's a picture of Professor Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens sitting in tall, straight-back chairs in this room with walls that are curtains that are colored a lot like this carpet. And if you look at my picture and you look at that picture very closely, you'll see that my son and I stood in the very same place and took that picture in the very same place that Dawkins and Hitchens had taken their picture just minutes before. And so I posted it, honestly, not thinking that anyone in the world would care. Because I had left the pulpit as far as being a pastor at least a year prior. And the only speaking engagements I was taking was, of course, after 25 years of being in the ministry, I had made lots of contacts and had lots of friends and even had relatives that pastored churches. And when they would call, I would select which ones I wanted to speak for. And I would go and speak, even though I was wrestling with these issues of theology or theism itself, trying to find my place in the only community that I knew, trying to see if there was a way to be this new Christian that I had evolved into and be able to maintain my place in the ministry. Because what's important for you to understand is that I don't know what type of assholes Voltaire was running into. But it's not the people that I lived with. I want to repeat that. It's not the people that I lived with. It's not the people that I knew. It's not the pastors of the churches that I preached at. It's not my fellow ministers. It's not the people that I fellowshiped with. My mentors in ministry, the Glass family, I'm not in any way going to say they're perfect, and if you want to learn some things, then buy the book when it comes out in June, or go on Amazon. But I try to be balanced with it, because these people are known in our community for burning up the highway. The best medical center that we have is Houston, is about 4 hours from my home. And senior pastor, George Glass Jr., over 70 years old, now has to have a driver, but has spent years driving back and forth from our little town of DeWitt, Louisiana to Houston to not just visit tithe-paying members, but to visit people that don't even have churches. What I'm wanting to express to you is that the ministry was not a career. It was a mission, and it was a heartfelt mission. And prior to last December the 1st, I had done everything that I could to maintain some semblance of connection to it. So as I say, last message in April, May, Clergy Project, October, my first real meeting with free thinkers, and then I come home around October the 10th or so and post this picture. And I thought I was far enough away. I thought I'd been out of the community enough that it was something that I could survive. Little did I know at the time that I had an 84-year-old great aunt that was fluent with the language of Facebook. So I don't know how old you are, but however old you are, it's no excuse, I can promise you. And she discovered the changes. And as a good gossiping Christian is prone to do, she began to call everyone that she thought might know me and request prayer. And before long it began to get out, and I realized that I wanted to get ahead of it. Not just that I needed to get ahead of it, but that I wanted to get ahead of it, because I realized more clearly than ever that what I was afraid of was the public rejection. Being a minister was the greatest pride of my life up to that moment, because you're God's guy. You're the man of God. You represent the creator of the universe. And everyone in that community loves you and respects you and thinks that you've got the answer. They don't know half the time you're just making crap up, trying to help feelings as best as you can. And thank goodness for armchair theological apologetics, where you can simply say, well, it's God's will, or God works in mysterious ways, or whatever you have to do to get yourself out of the corner to try to make someone feel better for that moment. I've emphasized this in other places, so I fear being too redundant, but please understand the weight of responsibility that is on that minister. I'm not talking about televangelist. Okay? I didn't hang with the televangelist. I don't know them. I know I have hair like them. But I don't know them. I don't know their hearts. I don't know their motivations. I'm suspect of them, but I don't know them. What I know is the local pastor. And the weight that is on that local pastor as he's standing next to that bed, and you're watching this loved one slip away from this reality, the only one that we're aware of, and it is your responsibility to look at that surviving spouse and to say something to ease the pain. That man or woman in the clergy, they know they don't have answers, and they know that there's nothing they can say to actually make it better. But they have to try, because they love these people, just as I loved all the people that I pastored and all the people that I preached to, and they loved me in return. And I had done everything that I could do to stay in the ministry, but now I was far enough away from it, and I was back in the secular life, and I was a building inspector, and I realized, or at least I thought I realized, that I was in a safe place to begin to express myself, to get out in front of this gossip that my great aunt was spreading. And so I had about 200 friends on Facebook at the time, and I went through, and there were 8 individuals that I thought that I should beat my great aunt to the punch and let them know what was happening. And so I wrote this nice little letter, and I sent it via Facebook to 8 different people. One of the individuals is a closeted homosexual within our community. I don't know how he stays closeted. He shares a home with his significant other, and I see them whenever the weather's good with the car top down on their way to the beach. I don't understand how this remains a secret, but it's still somehow a secret. And this person finally found someone whose life and reputation was in more jeopardy than his own. And I could tell where he was at in the community at almost any given day, because I would begin to get friend requests from people who I knew were at work and that I knew he was associated with, and he was running all over town saying, you need to friend Jerry so that you could go to his page and you can see what he's done. And word began to spread. And so through October and November of last year, extended family began to disintegrate. I have a cousin that's an Assembly of God pastor that really was like an older brother to me. And as soon as word made it to Texas where he pastors, his whole family unfriended me. Of course, not without his daughter first writing me a scornful Facebook message. As I've said before, I wasn't surprised that so many people who I once preached to suddenly believed I was going to hell, but I was shocked at how well they were taking it. Because suddenly my life, this is what's so important for me to transmit to you, out of my heart into yours. Their lives were so important to me. Their lives, and this wasn't wise and this wasn't good priorities, but their lives were actually more important to me than my own family's lives. I didn't mean for it to be, but it was the nature of the beast. And I spent more time counseling them than my own wife and my own son. And I thought that that relationship was reciprocal. I really did. I expected to have a constant line out in front of my house, ringing my doorbell, trying to save my soul. But it hasn't happened. It's been much easier for them to leave nasty messages on Facebook, or to just unfriend me, or to just pretend that what I'm doing doesn't exist and never happened. October, family begins to disintegrate. November, it gets more intense. November the 30th, a year ago yesterday, we buried our family pet, and it was at the lowest of the low of our emotions. My wife and I, we stood in our little backyard, my son next to us. We had a bird bath. We moved the bird bath out of the way. I dug the little grave, and we took a nice little cardboard box, and we took this indoor cat that had escaped outside and spent 2 days and finally was ran over, and we retrieved it from a nearby ditch, and we put it in this little box, and we stand there at about 11:30 at night. It's starting to mist, it's black throughout the woods surrounding our home, and we feel like life has gotten as low as it can get. And then the next day, I'm asked to meet my best friend, my boss, at the waffle shop. I drive over, take my little car, I drive into the parking lot. He pulls up in his truck, his white Nissan crew cab. He jumps out. He has his leather ledger in his hand. I stop when I see it and I say, should I get my book? Because we would always make sure we're duplicating all of our information, making sure that all the inspections are being done. There's a smile on my face. There's a smile on his face. The sky is blue. I'm trying to recover from burying our pet last night. I'm trying to draw my strength up from losing family members, from losing friends. I'm at least able to hold on to some semblance of this financial security and stability that is obviously needed, not just for me, but for my wife and for my family. He says, no, that's okay. You don't have to go back to your book. You don't need your book. We walk together just those few feet across the sidewalk. We go into this little restaurant that's been built for about 25 years, that started off as a Mexican restaurant and now is a waffle shop, a waffle house. Red-paned windows, large windows by almost each booth. He takes me to the back corner, the very last possible booth that we could go to. I'm still very comfortable, not suspicious in any way. We're dressed identical. he and I. We're both wearing our white long sleeve professional looking shirts and our blue jeans because we work outside. He had bought me those blue jeans. He had bought me those shirts. He was paying me almost as good as I'd ever been paid. He and I were absolute best of best friends. Even throughout a weekend, even before his wife passed away, which had been a few months prior to this, even throughout a weekend, I would hear from him probably 4 or 5 times throughout a weekend. We shared every experience and every situation. We sat down at this booth. We make short conversation for about 2 minutes. And then he opens up his ledger, unfolds 2 sheets of paper. One sheet of paper is the home page of the Clergy Project. The other sheet of paper is the home page of Recovering from Religion. He pushes them across the table and says, "This is what I was hit with this morning." I knew it was over. I knew at that moment it was done. What I want to express to you is very simply this. There's mirrors on your table. There were mirrors there for a reason, so that you could see yourself and see that it doesn't take a celebrity to propagate this message, if you will. But it takes normal people, real people, people living day in and day out, to just normalize non-belief. At that moment, my boss, Ronnie Rich, sitting across from me, was a mirror. Because what I could see in him, not only were we similar in so many other ways, not just in our appearance, the white shirt and the blue jeans, we were also similar in our demeanor. We were also very similar in our background because he at one time had been a charismatic preacher himself. Knowing that, many months prior, I had gone to him and explained to him what I was going through and the changes that I was making to the best of my ability at the time. And he accepted it and said, "You and I are brothers, and you'll still inherit this company, and nothing will ever change that." And his exact words months prior were, "Even if everyone in the world calls you an atheist,